This no BS, non-salesy conversation about enterprise data management with tasty beverages in hand. I'm Tim Gasper. This is Juan Zecada, my co-host. We're in Austin, Juan.
How you doing, Tim?
We're doing well.
And this is so cool that we are finally live in person with our guests, because we don't always are live with our guests. I think last time was in Big Data London with Chris Tab.
Yes.
So we're in Austin right now. What's going on in Austin is that there's a Data Day Texas, and one of the speakers, and who's our guest today, is Santona Tuli, who's the director of Data Upsolver. How are you doing?
Hi, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone.
I am super excited we finally get to do this, and it's so cool to get to do this in person. It's Thursday, 8:30 p.m. We usually do this Wednesday, middle of the week.
It's actually proper drinking hour.
Yeah.
Which we don't have a cocktail today because, and also whoever is watching us or looking at watching the video here, we're in my in the bar that I have in my house, so which has a lot of beer and wine, but.
Bar of wine.
It's a really good setup.
Anyway, so tell them toast. So what are we drinking and what are we toasting for? Want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm toasting to everyone being here for this conference. It's a great opportunity to run into everyone at least like once a year, because all the other conferences are a little bit like different people are at different ones, especially when two happen on the same day. Like there's one group going there and the other group going there. But this is, I feel pretty. The folks that I really like in data and enjoy spending time with are usually at this one. So toast to that.
No, that's awesome. I'll cheers to that as well. It's always fun when everybody gets together for day-to-day.
Exactly. Cheers.
Yeah.
And
cheers.
Cheers to the organizers. Thanks, Lynn, for always organizing such an awesome conference. So cheers. So we got our oral question. So what is your favorite productivity hack?
My favorite productivity hack is probably walking my dog. It just, clears my head, gets me up and moving. And it's not just like, oh, I'm stuck, I'm going to go walk my dog. It's like she makes me, makes me get up and go, which means like the time that I do have, I'm like at the computer, I'm like going at it. And then, I'll go and think about things and like go at it in my head and also like watch her chase squirrels and then come back and, it's refreshing.
That's funny. I don't have a dog, but I try to go on walks whenever I can. And now I'm thinking, man, maybe I got to get a dog. It makes it so you have to go out there regularly and clear your mind and think about things.
Yeah,
right?
It's like a Fitbit, but better. You can't ignore it.
Well, I was going to say something, technical. Oh, something with GPT or some, productivity tools, apps that you have. But now that you say that, I'm going to say, I get my best ideas in the shower, like organize my thoughts. So that's one. So I don't know, like it's not that I'm confused or whatever. Let me go get into the shower and go do that. I think that would be weird, but I can see now that I'm saying this out loud, I think I could do that. I'm going to try that out. How about you, Tim?
This is a hard question.
All right, you do something technical. What's your technical?
All right, I'll do something a little more technical. For me, it's going to be I add everything to my to-do list, like just everything. And that's just like my way of being a lot more clear and present when I'm having conversations and interacting with people, because I never have to worry about like, oh, I got to remember that thing.
Yeah,
it's all here.
What is that?
As long as I don't forget my phone.
There's an approach. There's a whole methodology for it, right?
Getting things with GTD, right?
Getting shit done. Right? Yeah, that one, right? Just put everything on it, and then you start organizing.
Yeah, exactly. So,
do you ever you get blocked by something, and then that prevents you from going down the list?
Sometimes, but I've been doing like to-do list kind of stuff for so long now that like it's almost second nature, and so I'm constantly like, people are always like, "What are you doing on your phone? You like on social media or something like that?" I'm like, "No, I'm rearranging my to-do list. I'm just moving things up and down because I'm going to change the order of what I'm doing." So,
all right, well let's kick it off. Honest, no BS. You wrote on a LinkedIn post previously, is productivity is not performance. So, honest, no BS. What do you mean by that?
What do I mean by that? It's really the distinction between output versus outcome. So you can do a lot without doing a lot, right? If what you're doing isn't building up towards, some bigger purpose, something that is well defined and well understood, and like the value is clear. So an example of this would be building out a very detailed, intricate engineering infrastructure for something like answering a simple question, like a simple BI question. Like maybe, depending on the phase of the business and the data practice and so on and so forth, you might want to pause and take a single question and sort of think, can I make it a process? Like, is there a version of this that's better as a process and productize and stuff? And it's good to put that thought into it, but definitely don't jump into, oh, I have this question, and so I have to like really build this out, and it's going to be 6 months, and then the answer was just 42. So,
so thinking about this, I'm curious in your experience, because you have a very, very interesting background, because we both have academic backgrounds and we get into this whole data space. How are you seeing like the different roles, the data roles coming in, and how are all these roles being, their definitions of are you being productive enough? How are you seeing this right now?
Yeah, I think data has always been a tough field to like define roles, and there have always been so many different roles. By the way, I'm making eye contact with a friend that I brought along, who you won't recognize. Maybe he'll come say hi at some point.
There's a secret live audience.
There is a secret live audience. What was I saying?
Roles.
Oh, data roles. Yes.
I had to think about that for a second too.
And yeah, productivity is going to look different, and like performance or actually producing value is going to look different for different roles as well. So yeah, I've posted in the past, or shared my thoughts in the past around like the distinctions between if you're doing data or ML work, because that's the core of the business, like like a Netflix or an Amazon, where like the business is really centered around building some sort of predictive model, and so on and so forth. Or if you're doing descriptive analytics for a company that is otherwise, the business is somewhere else, but you still want to have an understanding of the business, so the analytics function. It's important to have these distinctions, partly because not all skills are transferable. And I mean, this is not to say like this is not to gatekeep or draw boundaries. I think that any given individual can do both of those things and should learn. But it definitely helps to have these at least some understanding of what the purpose of the role is beyond what the title of the role is, right? So I think people, one thing that kind of bothers me, I think people often think of data analyst as someone who's like flutzing around and I don't know, in Excel, like isn't technical, but is like answering this data question. Then it doesn't, like, I can't really get behind that definition of a data analyst. Like and so I kind of like the word, the title analytics engineer, because that tells me a lot more about what kind of work you're doing. Like an ML engineer, you're doing ML, analytics engineer, you're working for the purpose of analytics, but I don't really know what a data analyst is, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, and just to back up a little bit, I think when you mention about like this distinction between roles that are at like data or machine learning companies where it's their core, right? Or maybe their core services depend on really critical pieces that they're doing there, versus a company where their core business is somewhere else and analytics is kind of in service of that. Maybe it's descriptive analytics, maybe it's other things. Do you actually think that that the roles themselves are a little bit different between these organizations?
Yeah.
Because one of the things I think that's kind of interesting is, you look at sort of the history of innovation, and a lot of times these very like data as their core businesses build out, new cutting edge infrastructure, or they come up with new machine learning techniques. I just think about like, the big data movement and Netflix and Yahoo and all these organizations really pushing the envelope of big data. And then all companies are like, oh, we want to get into that too. Right. So, should we be thinking differently about the distinction between these two different kinds of businesses?
Maybe. So, I mean, there's a couple of different factors. One is having those problems to solve, right? When you're at a certain scale, you have a unique set of problems to solve. And the other thing is having the resources to solve those problems. So again, if you're a big company, you're going to have those resources. But I mean, you never know where innovation comes from, right? So yes, a lot of the times, like the technological advancements that we've had, although the recent, like, I think the, generative AI is like half academic, half industry, I would say. But sorry, that's an aside. A lot of the times, these advancements do come out of these bigger companies, but it's not always the case, right? And like, you really don't know where technology is going to come out of. Like the touchscreen came out of CERN,
Mhm.
right? Which is like totally like that's not why like no one was developing the touchscreen there. It's just just how it worked out. So
Yeah.
The web came out of CERN.
Yeah.
You never know where all this innovation.
So you never know necessarily where the innovation is going to come from, and maybe in some cases it's coming from these data first companies. Maybe in some cases it's coming from other industries. But
yeah, and sometimes it's coming from like tooling companies, right? Like so, not everyone can build, XYZ tool within their company. So you have these little vendor or you have these like smaller companies that still need some version of that solved, and so there's a market need, and there does tooling company comes and solves.
So who innovates, and the other question is who should be innovating? So if you're in a smaller company, right? I mean, I would argue that everybody should be innovating. Right? I'd argue that.
Yeah.
But then how do you measure the productivity? Like, oh, you're doing this work, but I'm not seeing the immediate value right now. But you're like, oh, hold on, like give me more time. But there's still unknowns in here. And if we have a breakthrough, this is going to be huge, right? But sometimes it's a risk you have to take. So who can take those types of risks to do innovations?
That's a very good question. You certainly. There has to be room for that innovation.
Hey, cheers.
Look, you just popped in here. Look at that.
Hi.
Welcome
thank you very
to
much.
my show, Joe.
Anytime. Glad to crash it.
So
I
I
didn't
didn't
mean to
mean to
interrupt
party.
you.
Oh, all good.
So you're talking about innovation and who should do
Yeah,
it?
who should
Like,
do
what do you think?
I think that like as individuals, I think that's where innovation comes from, right?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, it's collaboration. It's sort of like working across boundaries. But I don't want to say just because you work at like a smaller company that's really focused on solving a specific problem that you can't innovate the next technology. I think it certainly could happen. If that's what you really want to do, you can also, partner up with academic institutions or these bigger companies. So yeah, I don't think there should be boundaries around who should be innovating. The only thing that I think matters with innovation, and this is a lot like research, is like you have to know where you're at. So a lot of reading and keeping yourself abreast of where we are today, because that's how you make the poke outside of that.
Mhm.
What do you think?
I've been thinking a lot about this in the context of what was that section? There was some law 174 or something like that Congress had passed about taxes back in 2017, like the tax cut bill. But what it means is now R&D expenses have to be amortized and not expensed. And so I wonder what this is going to do to
Bootstrap
innovation.
companies.
Yeah, right. So
This is the topic we were talking about a while ago.
right, because like before, you could expense your R&D against your
I mean, this could go back. Your developers building software and stuff.
yeah. So
Issues.
it kind of screws you over on that one.
Yeah.
And then I'm like, okay, so
Why?
like, why?
Yeah. That's
Well, so what? So it's an accounting thing. So now instead of expensing that payroll expense in one lump against your revenue, now you can only do, I think, what is it, 20% per year or something like that, whatever number it is. It's
So
like,
let's say that you are cash flow neutral, right?
Yeah.
Well, I made zero money, so I don't pay no taxes. But because your expenses were your payroll, and you're like, well, no, you can't now put all your payroll as your expenses. You can only put 20% of it. So it's like, so technically I got more money, so I have to go pay taxes on that. But like I made no money.
yeah.
So
I wonder what it's going to do to innovation, especially for
people want to do bootstrap and want to, innovate in a different way. They don't want to have take a lot of capital and stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean that could kneecap a lot of stuff. Because I think the promise of a lot of government investment into small businesses is maybe they'll do something interesting, right? I mean, I was at a conference last night where in Utah where they're celebrating all the people involved in tech and AI, and I'm like, yeah, okay, cool. It's good to see everybody here, and I wonder who's going to be able to innovate under like these kind of constraints, because just
That's
business
crazy.
is business. So I mean, that's something out of left field, where it's just a consideration. But I think absent of that, sure, like innovation is one of those things that hopefully people are doing, but it depends on the type of business you're in and what the appetite for risk is. Because if you're small, the appetite for risk is, on one hand, you should be taking risky things because that's what's going to make you great. On the other hand, you don't have a lot of runway.
So
you could
go ahead.
you could argue that like smaller companies are doing their innovation anyway, like within what they're trying to bring to market, right? Like, unlike Google's moonshot or something, I'm literally putting, everything at stake if I'm a founder.
No, I mean, I guess at that point, like as a startup, your definition is innovation because you're doing something nobody has done before. Exactly. But if you think about like the role, I mean, the function of data in an organization. So what is the function of data? And I think this is a topic we've had in so many.
Is this one of those like those Bob questions on Office Space? Like, what do you do here?
Well, I mean, so many people, you say like, oh, think about like 10 years ago, right? Like, oh, data science and data's the new oil. It's like, oh, we're doing, there are things that we're not doing with data we should. So we should be innovating because that could generate like, so one could argue that a lot of innovation in companies should be coming from data teams. But then at the same time, it's like, well, you don't understand the business, you don't do this thing. So it's like you see this disconnect. I don't know. This is what's
so there's kind of a blurry line, I think, for data organizations in terms of like, what you brought up at the beginning in terms of like output versus outcomes. Like, is working on innovation in a data organization, especially if you're not a data core company, is innovation a worthwhile place for people to be spending time on a data team?
I don't know, man. I mean,
versus just crank out more BI reports, I don't
know. I mean, look at successful businesses, right? I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she was hanging out with a bunch of wealthy CEOs of companies, and one of them owned a beer distribution company. And he has she showed me pictures of like all these yachts, beer distribution company guy, hot dog stand owner guy who has like the largest hot dog stand company in the U.S., right? And it's like, and you look at companies like Chick-fil-A. I went there a few months ago and met them, and chicken sandwiches. I'd say from a technology standpoint, they're doing really innovative stuff, like crazy.
A couple like Chick-fil-A, like I know that they own their real estate, like so they have an entire real estate arm and all the data that people do for real estate because want to know exactly where exactly do I need to go put this place to go, and then they have drones and they figure all this shit out. Like,
I mean that's innovative.
Yeah,
right. They're using data as to make those kinds of decisions. So I would say like businesses, if you can do it that way and just succeed to improve your business, I mean, it's the same as it ever was, I guess. But to do data for its own sake, I would say is a bit weird because it's kind of like, is that really going to get you like the benefit? Because you got to kind of know what you're doing too, right? Yeah. So I don't know. But as you say, like outcomes and outputs, and is that what you said? Or
yeah.
Like that's I didn't want to just. Yeah. Well, what you really mean to say is mansplain it to you,
So innovation can be outcome focused. And there's a lot of companies that are like Chick-fil-A that are doing very interesting things around data that's innovative, even though they might not be considered a company that's data at its core.
Right. Innovation can be a byproduct easily of outcome-driven work. Mm-hmm. So that's one example. That's how like things come out of places that you don't expect, and that's what I'd say. And then the other, I guess. I would hope that even under constraints of like, limited runways and stuff, I would hope that like part of enjoying your job is having some sort of creative freedom. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think anyone really would be happy if you're like, you have to check these 3 boxes and this is what you have to do every day.
But that's a lot of people's jobs. I mean, it sucks, but that's reality.
Yeah, I mean,
I think we all had jobs like that, right?
Yeah.
Compliance stuff.
Like, Tim, just move that pile of boxes over there. Now move them back to the same spot, and I want you to do that all day.
And count them while you're at it.
And count them each time. But that's literally, I mean, we joke, but that's a lot of work.
Yeah,
it's a lot of people's jobs.
This is true.
And it's just, I mean.
Well, a lot of people in the data space too, I feel like are maybe feel like they're caught in a job. Maybe a lot of them have the title data analyst, and they don't feel like they're getting to do very exciting stuff. Maybe they don't even feel like they're working on the stuff that's going to have the biggest outcome.
Exactly. Yeah. And like everyone's aspiring to be a data scientist, but the lines are so blurry anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So this is interesting. So is this? People are like driven. They want to do something different, fun, innovative, but they're like, I'm just moving boxes from here to here, right? And I'm like, well, there's this new cool technology that comes out. So I'm going to go test and play because I feel by testing and playing with that stuff, I am being innovative. But I mean, maybe you are, if you are doing things that are outcome driven. But if you're like, I'm just gotta move my boxes here and there, and then like, are you really like, you're just maybe just wasting your company's time and money?
I got like a pallet lift or a forklift, like that's innovation, right? I mean, think about real innovation, like whoever invented the shovel. I think Morgan Housel was writing about that in his new book, same as ever, but like that's a genius thing. I mean, people were digging stuff for years, like by hand or with rocks, and then a shovel comes along, like that's pretty amazing, like that. But I mean, you got to consider who was the first person that thought of doing that. That person was probably considered to be an idiot. Like, why are you wasting your time? Like, keep digging holes. What are you doing?
I mean, always that same picture character, like the wheel, or right, they got a gun or whatever. Like, people.
Yeah. So it's just, I think it's innovations and one of those things where innovation is a weird thing too, because it happens kind of out of left field, like because it's all these confluence of different ideas and experiences that come together for something new. And,
There's another thing I find interesting as far as innovation goes is there have been so many times in history that like this essentially the same idea was developed in completely separate locations, and it's so interesting, especially like if you look at the history of physics and math. It's like there's something natural about the progression of innovation that like it's an unstoppable force, and based on what we know today, we are going to get us to the next step. And there are different places where it can pop up. I think that's really cool.
And then the other thing that's my big pet peeve is like when we are really not, when we think we're innovating, but we're not, because we don't read don't know our history, and we don't build on the shoulders of giants.
Give us some examples of this when you talk about that. I find this is interesting. The false positives of being innovative. Like what does that look like?
I mean, I just think that like if we look at the data space, I think just by not understanding a lot of the core, the foundational principles, then we start thinking about all this stuff as like, oh, this is a brand new thing. We get excited about it. We spend, I mean, you've talked about this too, right? Like the dead 10 years or whatever, like the dead decade that we didn't advance anything because we were just doing the same thing, just a different set. Look, a database, a data warehouse, like it's all the same shit. It's just there's differences in there, but conceptually the principles are the same. And then we just focus on the specific details and make those details are different. But when we zoom out, the problem is still the freaking same problem we haven't solved. I mean,
yeah.
So I mean, the talk I'm going to give this weekend, it's like just sneak peek. Like I'm going to just a screenshot of a problem description, which I swear that everybody's going to say, yeah. Well, I just copied and pasted that from a paper from 30 freaking years ago. What the fuck have we been doing for the last 30 years?
Evidently not solving that problem, right?
But we all say we have that problem, right? I can't find my data. I know this customer is. I don't know this customer is the same customer. This is like.
One thing is when there is a need, like that kind of surfaces everywhere, then like you've often have multiple people sort of jumping on that idea of solving for that need, and somewhere down the line they kind of forget to iterate and come back and see if that need still exists, or if it's evolved, or if they need to refine their idea or not. So I mean that's how we end up with 101 BI tools, none of which are good, right?
Yeah, I mean that was one thought that came to my mind is like how many ways of BI tools successful, but like think of how many BI companies have been started.
Right, and successful is not the same as being good.
Yeah, true, very true. And connected to this is it's interesting to see where a real novel innovation is going to happen, where you're really actually making progress. And like for example, I think something that is an example of this maybe is like you've got lots of database companies, right? Lots of companies that are in the data warehouse space and things like that. And they're like, oh, my indexer's a little bit faster and things like that, right? But then, and it's not, another company could have figured this out. But then you have a company like Snowflake, right? Comes in and says, oh, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I can separate storage and compute, and I'm going to create a novel approach to sort of the cost economics of managing on-demand data warehousing. It's like, oh, well, that was an interesting trick that they did there, right? And it didn't have to be Snowflake. It could have been somebody else. But it's interesting to see when these switches get flicked, where now maybe we are actually making some progress.
I mean, do you remember when Snowflake came on the scene?
Mm-hmm.
And you first started meeting with them, and you're like, I think the other innovative thing they did is they just sort of understood how to talk to the customer in a really simple way.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is like you've tried this product here, you tried this product here. right? It solves a lot of those pain points. Like I remember meeting with the salespeople, but is it 2016-ish?
I thought you were going to say 20 years ago.
20 years ago, Bob Julio. Just kidding. But no, I mean, I instantly recognize, okay, they get it. They know how to talk to customers. They understand the enterprise. They understand the pain points. They understand. So I mean, it was as much, I think, a technological innovation as it was a sales and marketing innovation too, where they
That's
just
true.
sort of knew exactly how to talk to the customers and solve their pain point, right?
Yeah.
And then the sign up process was super easy too. It's like, I don't know, do you have a credit card? Yes. That's cool. So after 2 weeks, you're trying this out, you can put that credit card in, and then you can pay.
Well, I think it
That's
goes
right.
back to like the outcome versus output.
Yeah.
Right. I think it's like you have a very clear, like, this is what you're trying to achieve. Like,
Yeah.
this is the value of trying to go achieve that. This is what we're focused on. So that's the outcome perspective. And I think,
Yeah.
and I agree, like the case is like, it's also marketing and sales, but what is that? That's just communication.
So it
Right.
is.
And I think that goes back to like a lot of the issues that we see today is like, well, we're not able to communicate what am I doing and why is it important. And then when you are communicating, you're communicating the output. Oh, I did this. I generated so many dashboards and I generated so many pipelines and all these DBT models we did. And like, oh, look at all this stuff that I have. I'm like, what was the output? What was the outcome?
Exactly.
What did we
That
do?
is my probably my current biggest pet peeve. Like I'll hear a sentence like, I have 1,600 DAGs running in production. Like, why do you need 1,600? You're a BI team, right? You know, like,
Well, that's
so-
crazy because that's like 1,600 points of technical debt not
I-
using for.
right. Why are you proud of that?
Yeah, it's like if I had like I like kids, but if you replace like the word DAGs with children, like would you be as impressed at yourself? Like I have 1,600 kids. Like slow down.
Is that the data engineering litmus test?
That's you're like the Will Chamberlain of data engineers at that point. Yeah. So
Replace it with children, and how do you feel?
yeah, litmus. Yep. Actually, that's a good one. I like that. Yeah. Or something, like that. Things that are hard to take care of.
Yeah.
Require a lot of thought.
Uh,
But Juan's not getting PTSD.
Well, I'm just. This is a great another. In our notes where we bold anything that is t-shirt worthy, and that's a good one.
I think I always come up with random crap for you guys.
Hey, the more pithy and weird sayings we can produce, the better. That's the outcome that we're driving here. Yeah, when you mentioned about number of DAGs and things like that,
We're dads.
dads, hopefully not thousands of dads. I don't know which one. I remember when DBT came out with their blog post where they first revealed how many DBT models that they had, and it was like 1,200 or something like that, some ridiculously high number. And I remember that it was like kind of a weird inflection point for folks along this whole like output versus outcomes kind of question of like, oh wow, that's so impressive, and then it was like, oh wait, is that impressive? Is that bad? Maybe that's bad. I don't know.
About what year was that?
I think it was like maybe 3 years ago,
No,
2 years
probably
ago?
less.
Less than that, maybe. Okay. I know it was after they already changed their name to DBT Labs, so it must have been like maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago. But yeah. I thought that was an interesting moment in like thinking about like as analytics engineers, are we being productive?
Are we good at
being
measuring?
impactful?
Yeah, are we good at building metrics of the metrics that we've built for ourselves?
So are DAGs and models like the new lines of code?
And apparently more is
Maybe.
what?
I mean, yeah.
And yeah, I mean,
And it
but-
could
but-
be an impressive vanity metric to say like I've created.
Right.
But,
Exactly,
but people,
exactly.
but again,
That's
but people have been doing
actually-
this for so long, right? They create their ETL pipelines and Informatica stuff, and they have all this shit that goes on, and then they have their own code, and they have, and it's not an ETL tool, but they did it in the stored procedures, right? They did all this stuff, right? So that we've been doing this over and over.
Oh
again,
yeah.
right? So
I mean,
this
I don't
isn't
know if you
new.
remember. Yeah, stored procedures. That's a hellscape in itself. I mean, lots of probably impressive outcomes and outputs, but they're highly invisible typically. You look in a database, it's like I don't know what's happening there. It's like, oh, that's happening there.
Yeah, I remember
Never
once
mind.
working with a customer. We're like, okay, so this stored procedure. So what does this stored procedure do? And I'm like, well, it's all these lines of code in it. And let's look at the comments. And obviously, the comments started 20 years ago, right? So you have 20 years of comments.
Oh dear.
And then they said, well, who should we ask? Who's the responsible person? Well, the last person who wrote the comment, they went in there and then like this was a year ago or whatever, and like, oh yeah, that person died from COVID. I'm like, see, this is the stuff that you have to go through.
Yeah.
Right. And this is not new anymore. You know what? And now it goes back to my like, oh, we're innovating with new modern things. Like we're just replicating that same type of debt in this other new modern tool, whatever you want to go do that. But so this is why this is why we need to focus on the principles.
How do we focus on the principles in terms of producing better outcomes?
So question here is then the architectures that we have today. This is something one thing I want to talk about. Like, what are the current architectures? I mean, what are the standard types, approaches, principles of the architectures that we have today, and what do we need to innovate on that to make things simpler, better, or whatever to be able to drive better, faster outcomes?
Architectures in terms of.
I mean, we're not specifically in our data world right here.
I mean, obviously the old trope, which we'll be talking about at Day-to-Day Texas, and it's going to be funny because there's two opposing viewpoints on this. One is business value should matter in this equation for outcomes, and the other is business value is the last thing you should be thinking about, which I think is you'll find out who's going to talk about what at Day-to-Day Texas. We'll not spoil the surprise for you. But that's one litmus test perhaps to think about it. I don't know. But I don't think it's the only one. I can think of many. You're on the spot right now. You're just going, yeah, all right.
I'm really trying to parse it and trying to figure out what angle to come at it from. So, I mean, what comes to mind, because this has been top of mind for me, is the open table format. That's this technology that's coming on. I mean, it's not exactly new, but it's sort of catching on more now.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes to mind because I've been trying to organize this Chill Data Summit, by the way, shout out. Chill Data Summit, New York City, February 6th. But it is
We'll be there. We'll be there, by the way.
Yeah, Joe's going to be there. I don't know. Juan hasn't said anything yet. I don't know.
It's pretty chill, though.
TBD.
That's so much fun. I don't even know where I'm going to be. So I don't even know where my calendar is.
But yeah, I mean, like that's a piece of innovation, I think, that's come out of a necessity, which is where sometimes some innovation. We talked earlier about how innovation comes from weird places.
Sorry, I did a beer burp.
This is why you don't know. Right.
Outcomes and outputs.
This is one of the benefits of being
all
Zoom, virtual.
Yeah, I won't be invited back in person. Sorry, guys.
Please get back.
Poor Santona too. She's like, I can't even talk right now. I just have to go leave.
This is a test, by the way, to see how you react to aging virtual.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what Open Table is?
Yeah, sure. So, okay, let me try to do the short version. I was just making slides for this, but so we've got databases and data warehouse, and as you said, like we've been sort of toying around with how to make them more efficient, or whatever requirement comes up, addressing them. And then we had the data lake that kind of came out of like, okay, not like you don't need this sort of structured interface to interact with your data that a data warehouse produces for every use case. So like if you have a use case that you're serving a machine learning model, you just need to store, let's say an NLP model, you just need to store the vectorized documents or whatever. So like a different set of requirements, and then so you've got this data lake that's closer to just like files and storage. So that's a data format, like Parquet is a data format, right? So serialized files and storage. And then on top of that, you have some sort of like Hive metadata catalog or something, which is why I was asking you that question earlier. And then, so that works, but it is pretty low level because you're really going down to, okay, you have the data level, and then you have a catalog that doesn't have any real power to influence how the data are arranged. It just kind of knows where things are. So when you're running a query, you still have to do a lot of thinking about, okay, how do I access this piece of information? Because a piece of information can be spread across multiple different files and multiple different like parts of a file, right? So like that sort of query planning and logic is, it's just like, it takes more work. The lower level you get typically, right, is the more engineering intensive it is. So that I feel has been the main, like the biggest issue with data lakes, and that's often why like we've ended up with swamps instead of like well-maintained lakes and stuff. So I think we're entering a new era, sort of, where a table format, open or not, as opposed to a data format, is a specification, just like Parquet is a specification for how data should be serialized and stored in these files. The table format is a specification of how the files and information need to be organized, and how you have how you contain that information so that you can trace along a path to get to the information you want. So read up on it. I'm not like, this is a 2-second description, so just let me. So you've got this layer on top of the data, basically, that's like in between the data and the catalog, that is smarter about how the data is organized and how you can access it. So the query planning, it's a little bit like storage procedures, actually. So the query planning is kind of done ahead of time for you, so that when a query engine comes in, like, it can get to it more efficiently.
And I like this a lot. I've been noodling on this quite a bit. What kind of outcomes do you think? What kind of innovations and outcomes do you think are going to come about because of these table formats?
I think what we're going for here, like, table format is a technology that's enabling it, but I think what we're going for in terms of the need is like a data lake that's more usable, that's more queryable.
But what's the problem with data lakes right now?
Like, it's hard to access the information in a meaningful way. Like, I've built a data lake and used it, but only for an ML use case. Like, I would never really do a data lake if I was trying to answer 60 business questions. I would go to the warehouse, because it's like I'm doing the transformations, I'm generating the tables and views that are going to be relevant. So it's like, how, even like if you think back on just denormalized versus normalized data, right? It's the same things. Like, how queryable. So I'm trying to coin this thing. It's not going to work, but I'm trying to coin the term queryability index. It would help if it was easier to say. But basically, the more optimized you get in terms of like how you're storing things, how compact things are, historically, the less queryable your data has gotten. But I think with this lake house and like this table format layer on top of the data, you can sort of bridge that. You can have it's still Parquet files, stored, but because you have this layer over top of it, that increases the queryability.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of if you example of how the data is, and how would you access it without that queryable index you were talking about, and then with it? Like what would make it, because you have the queryable index, makes what faster, better, easier, whatever?
Yeah, let me try. So with okay, let me go back to the data lake that I had for an ML application. Right here, I would do like vectorize all the documents and stuff, and then I would have different folders. I mean, it's not really folders, because S3 is just it's just paths, but you can think of it as like folders of data, let's say from a certain day, and then that's partitioned by like the hour, and and so on. So some like way of organizing the data that doesn't have anything to do with the data, really, like, or very little to do with the data. So, and that's what like the metadata catalogs, without the table format, what they do is like they kind of know which folder to open up to get to what data, and so on and so forth. What the table format does, so you still have to you still know where the data are and what you would have to open up to get to them. But in addition to that, like one of the cool things in the table format is like you can do merge on read, which is like instead of going and like copying your data and making changes when updates happen, or overwriting them, God forbid, what you're doing is you're not changing.
Always do that, by the way.
Instead of changing the data, you're just logging the updates that need to happen to it. So at query time, when the customer or when the user is trying to retrieve that data, it combines and merges both the data and this change log to see what the relevant transformations need to happen to the data to get to the current state. So it's like I almost think of it as like a smart layer in between that like preserves the optimization that comes from like having a lake-like infrastructure that you can still access in a like you can write queries against it. Like you can say like, you know, select this and, you know, join this depending on what your query engine is, and you can get your data.
I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you have the raw data how it is, and you just put a layer which is, I mean, like you say, it's basically a smart layer to understand how you can access it, how it can be combined just to improve your optimizations on
Exactly.
on how to query things. I mean, at the end of the day, like one of the things that fascinates me in computer science is it's all about abstraction layers, right? So you're just, as a computer scientist, the way I was educated was like, yeah, you basically figure out what abstraction layer you want to you enjoy.
Exactly.
Right? People like to go all the way down to the core to the bits and everything, and then you get higher, and then to user interfaces and stuff, right?
Exactly.
And then you are also become a compiler. Like, oh, I like to work between these two
Exactly.
areas.
Yeah.
And so I'm comfortable in these two, and I'm an expert in like the compiling part. So I think this is always interesting for the data.
Yeah. And I mean, the other thing I want to say on table formats is it's been there. Like, so let's say, how does Snowflake make your table, right? Like when you do a transformation or something like that, there is logic that's happening because a table is not a real manifestation of data, right? It's still in files somewhere. And so it, you know, it has this set of stored procedures or whatever it may be, its own version of table format that like kind of retrieves the data in this smart way for you. But now that's where the openness comes in. We have these projects that are sort of almost simultaneously, you know, have been coming out that it's like, let's just break that. Let's bring that out. Let's make it open so that you can have your data in these optimized file formats, but you can still have that logic and you know the metadata management built in.
I think the other cool thing with the open table formats is it allows you the possibility of I wouldn't say avoiding vendor lock-in, but having more options for query engines, which especially in today's world is not a bad thing. We were talking about this in the podcast. I can't remember with who, but I feel like one scenario is that Snowflake becomes, as you have more Iceberg, Hoodie, Delta Lake, and so forth. One scenario is everyone just becomes a better query engine and a different type of query engine, and so you just pick the query engine that you deserve, I guess, or like. Because
it's a higher level abstraction where you're doing all that just to have better query optimizations at the end. Like that is the outcome I want. I want to have very fast queries, and then like I don't care if it was this. All I care about is like I got faster, and that's what I was looking for.
Exactly.
Yeah, what was that? I think in Rob Martin's Clean Architecture, I think he's talking about like interface separation concerns or something like that. Or I can't remember which principle it was in Solid. Maybe it's open close, but either way, whatever. But the whole point is like you basically, for any higher level abstractions don't need to care about the lower level, components and so forth. And I think that's very much, where we've always been going and will continue to go. So with storage, it's an interesting one because I feel like that's been the crux, like getting your data out. Google did an interesting thing like 2 weeks ago, I think it was, where they got rid of egress fees if you want to move your data out of Google, which I think was pretty dope. So hopefully egress fees go the way of the cell phone minutes at some point. I think they're kind of stupid, but there's a lot of money to be made on that. So you're going to keep doing that as long as you can until somebody, I guess, introduces throws a wrench in the whole prisoner's dilemma problem, then everyone has to go do it. But back to the interoperability issue was a very interesting one because I feel like the world is going to move away from hopefully, one scenario is that this actually doesn't work out at all, and that open table formats are like a fad and go away, or just kind of don't get the traction they need. On the other hand, the other alternative is that they get a lot of traction, and then companies are forced to compete on other stuff besides storage, which becomes, and it always has been, really commoditized. I mean, there's obviously certain factors with storage where you want that to be really awesome to work with, like, for retrieval, but depending on what you need to do. But that also depends on the query engine. If you study databases, that's kind of how that works. So yeah, and like, but then it becomes a question of like whose optimizer is going to like give you the best performance for the data that's in that open table format? And I think that's maybe an interesting question, because now does it become a matter of database optimizers being better? I don't know. But it's an interesting thought experiment. I think that's might be where we're going, though.
It's hard to tell which of these trends are going to overtake each other. You know, like, because you think about like what different like vendors like Snowflake and the Databricks and the Microsofts of the world are doing around just like, their data warehouses and improving query optimization and things like that, virtualization tools, open frameworks, versus AI and what's happening with LLMs. And like, it's hard to tell.
There's nothing happening there.
Right. It's hard. Like, it's a very weird moment in time right now, I feel like, for data people.
So confusing.
Because there's interesting things happening with open source. There's interesting things happening in the cloud and with proprietary technology. But ultimately, we're in this weird moment right now where things feel relatively stable with the technologies and the approaches that we're used to. Mm-hmm. And yet there's this big wave here that we see coming, and we're like, what is this going to do? Like, what's this going to change for us? Is this a distraction? Are we going to be really output oriented for the next few years here and figure out that we were spending a lot of time on something stupid, or are we like at the beginning of a productivity revolution as data people?
I think the answer is always yes to everything you just said.
It's great, and it's stupid.
How many hype cycles have you been through? I mean, it's always the same. I mean, of course it's going to have a lot of ridiculousness and a lot of outputs, but like at the end of the day, there's a lot of value to large language models and generative AI. And, I mean, I use it all the time. I use it as somebody to talk to because I'm lonely. And just
hello, friend.
Yeah, I'm just I have nothing else going on.
Your name is
life.
Bob.
Yep. Or Dad. So. Yeah, but it's an interesting one. I find that it captures a lot of blind spots in my thinking that I wasn't aware of because it's read a lot more books than I have. For one, and so that's
better than a rubber duck.
Yeah, I have like 4 of them on my desk. In fact, I posted a picture the other day on my Instagram where it was like
4 chat GPTs.
Yeah, I was gonna say you got 4.
There's like Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. I got these like rubber duckies of them back at the shawl.
No, I thought you said like you had 4 different LLMs that you talked to.
Well, no, I do that too. Actually, I use Anthropic and I use I subscribe to OpenAI, and then I also have Bard. It's interesting comparing the results of all of them.
Perplexity is the other one.
I have that on my phone. I love Perplexity. I use it all the time. It's dope.
It's fun.
Yeah. But I don't know. Let me ask you this. Bring it back to open table format. Sorry, but before we go off like what is? So you work at Upsolver. Like why is Upsolver interested in open table formats? I'm just curious. Like what's the fascination?
Yeah. That's a good question. So I mean, we've always, maybe not always, but like our product is like a replacement Spark. We have a query execution, we have query planning, like it's sort of everything's built in, and it's always been like the ETL, the transformation comes together with our what we call SQL Lake, like our data lake, really a lakehouse structure. So, and that's like, it's been a really strong value prop for our customers. But I think with the advancements, with the creation of these open, like other table formats that are open in the lakehouse, like we want to basically separate the transformations from the file formats and table formats, like the storage aspect. So again, like this is what we were talking about a little while ago, right? Like we don't have to have the two combined, because you can be modular. You can have this metadata layer and metadata management layer that just is just about organizing your data, and you just pick up that box and you move it here, and then one can also reach the things that because we all speak the same language. So like the standardization that comes with this sort of open metadata management is like worth more than.
But wait, but isn't the standard here already like something like SQL and that's it?
Well, SQL there's no like planning in SQL.
Well, so this is where I'm like, when I talk about the pendulum swings, right? We're reinventing a lot of the wheels of just query optimizations that exist that are very well studied in databases, and now that I think what happens is that we go to this cloud infrastructure, right? And then we separate storage and compute. So then we're like, well, we got to redo all the work that's been decades done in query optimizations, right? So then it's like, this is, I don't know. The honest no BS for me is like, this is not an interesting problem because just conceptually it's been solved. Now you got to go figure out how to adapt it to this thing and that thing. But conceptual is like, I don't think there's new optimizations, cost models or stuff that needs to be invented for this. But I would be happily proven wrong, please.
When you say SQL, right, you're assuming a data in a format, like you're assuming a table essentially, because what you're talking about is an entity that actually, like a piece of information that means something as opposed to being like raw lines in a file, right? So in order to get to that I mean, that's what the promise is, and that's what it's harder in a data lake because, you know.
So yeah, and I think this goes back to insight to you is, modeling and things like that. I mean, there's some things that like effectively there's like models, there's semantics and stuff everywhere, but we just decide not to pay attention to it. So we're like, well, if I want to avoid doing all this modeling things, so I'm gonna have to go jump and figure all these hoops to do all these things so that I can optimize queries. But if you did invest in doing all this modeling stuff, you wouldn't have to go do this stuff. It would because then.
I'm glad we had some spicy takes like an hour into the podcast.
Oh wow, we're 50
I'm gonna let you
minutes.
guys fight it out for a second. I'm gonna go grab another beer. You guys want another beer?
I'm good.
You good?
I got my already. Yeah, you know.
You good, Tim? Oh, we good.
I'm good for now, but I will need another soon. I want to see what the next hour of this conversation is like.
Well, I mean, we can keep going.
That's true. Well,
You gotta keep.
Well, eventually. But here, let's do one final question here before we do lightning round.
Okay.
Oh, so you do want to?
Do you want me to answer?
Yeah, no. He needs to answer.
There is. I agree with you on the swinging of the pendulum metaphor, right? I think we do that, and I think there is a little bit of that happening. So, in many ways, the lake house is the pendulum swinging back towards the warehouse and the database. So that's the first thing I'll say. I think of the lake house as a combination of the lake, databases, and data warehouses, because you also get the other thing you get with these lake houses, which is not just a table format, it's table format plus, right? With clever management and the query engine is asset.
Plus you get quote unstructured data as well.
I think that's what makes it harder. I mean, that's what makes it different.
Yeah.
You got to what instructor?
Well, I mean, the lake house architecture too. You know, it gives you the. It moves past like the structured data world, or tabular data, I should say, right? So I'm thinking about when I think about data modeling, and I published a post last week in my practical data modeling Substack about how I think about data modeling, and I feel like it's moved beyond the world of rows and columns at this point, like because you're having like I mean the reality is people are like combining different types of data together now. It's not just
exactly.
It's just
And one model doesn't serve everything, right? Like as you have new use cases and different use cases, that's another problem with what we think of, or I think at least maybe I think you can tell me if you think of it differently. But when I think of a data warehouse, it's often like from the old days of an enterprise data warehouse, right? It's basically meant to be a model of your business. And so you go through and you figure out the entities that are important to you. And it's just so far abstracted from the actual data, right? Sometimes you have use cases that are somewhere in between.
Yeah, that's just it. But I mean, Bill Inman, our good friend, wish he was here. Hope he gets a good recovery soon. But it was, I think he's a big proponent of the lake house. I mean, thank God he's written 3-4 books on it right now. But I mean, even in the 90s, he had this realization that, the amount of structured data in the world that's tabular data was really small compared to all the text data. And this is in the 90s. And it's funny when you talk to him, he had the vision of the lake house back then, because he's like, most corporate data sets even back then were text data.
Right.
Stuff people type that's not in the table.
Right.
So that's why he worked in textual ETL still is working on it. But that was like genius. He laments to me, and I'm sure to many other people he talks to, but it's like he actually he left that data warehouse world behind
a long time ago.
In the early 90s. He's just like, that's great.
The world wasn't ready to move on then. We wanted to swim in that for 50 years.
We're still swimming in it, dude. It's crazy because he's just like, he'll still talk about it, the data warehouse, but he's like, he moved on mentally a long time ago. You know, he was studying stuff like taxonomies, ontologies, all this stuff that like he was not familiar with at all. Stuff that you'd be awesome at. But it's like him, you know. But the realization is just objectively that is most of the data is all of the unstructured stuff.
Goes back to like I think one approach to deal with this is to actually invest in the metadata and the semantics of what this stuff actually means. But that I think what history has always shown us is that it's always been hard. It's expensive. It's manual, and I do generally believe, like, to bring back a little bit of LLMs here, is like this is like some godsend. Like, hey, this thing is actually going to help us to go.
Oh, I think it's going to help a shit ton. I mean, literally, the idea of a transformer as a translate. That is like it was literally that's why it was invented by Google as a translate languages, right? And it did a good job at it. So, yes, I mean, what happens when you have concepts that you're trying to translate between different things? It's literally that's how it was interesting. I think Jeremy Stanley from Anomaly, we were talking on our podcast, and it was interesting. He brought the idea of like relational embeddings. And I think that's an interesting concept too, where like applying the relational algebra concepts, but to embeddings you'd have in a vector database. I think that's a fascinating topic. I don't know what he's done with it since then, but it was pretty dope.
So to bring this back,
we're nerding out.
But I do want to bring this back.
Look at the audience here. Look at who you have. This is. We still
need to go through our
listeners. You're nerds, right? We're all nerds, right?
I do want to take this as our lightning round question, but there's so much takeaways. Everything we're discussing. So what? Go back to like this whole thing started like productivity. We're talking about outcomes. Like, so what?
That's actually part of my question here. Is like, like,
how are you going to justify?
It can be one table or it can be something else. But like, or open table. Like, what's the better future we're trying to get to here? Like, what are we trying to accomplish?
What is the outcome we want to achieve?
Is it as data people? Is it as data people we feel like things are too hard and we want them to be easier? Is that like the outcome we're looking for? Or
faster, stronger, better, more optimized, cheaper. Right?
Cheaper.
Yeah. Like I mean that was
optimized. I was just thinking of the iron triangle and which one. Which
I was thinking about Daft Punk.
I was thinking Daft Punk.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, that's a.
Yeah, I mean, we're as Joe was saying, like data takes various forms, and you can't fit the same box to all kinds of data, and that's why we're and again, I think of these things as all new because I mean maybe it's a few years, but that's still new, right? Like vector databases, graph databases, like different data, and like search based, like document based databases and stuff. Like different data deserves different treatment because the storage can be optimized and the query paths can be optimized in different ways, and we should, and I think we should embrace that. Like I don't think anyone loses anything. Like you want to be grumpy and say so what?
Well, this is a good point because nobody loses anything, but then you're probably leaving something on the table, right? So it goes tying it back. On innovation, right? We could be doing things that we're not doing that we didn't know that we should. So we're pushing the barrier.
And there's always an opportunity cost. But coming back to another. Sorry, I'll let you go. Coming back to another thing we were talking earlier, like if you're an analytics engineer, that's a well-defined thing. You don't have to use. I don't know. You don't have to use a vector database.
You can use CSVs.
Yeah. Like no one's forcing it like upon.
I'm gonna read that blog post. But I'm an analytics engineer. I spend most of my time with CSVs.
I mean that's just the reality. You're saying out loud
what everybody's doing, right? Yeah. It's Excel.
It's like saying I use one ply toilet paper at my house. That's all I can afford.
You're saying it's not something you say out loud?
Yeah, I mean, thrifty.
We've established that Joe doesn't have any filters.
Truly don't. It's an interesting one, but I think, it allows people the opportunity to do things easier. I mean, but that's, I guess, I would say all this stuff is an enabler. And so in that sense, there's not much downside. It enables you to do better things. But it's what I've been writing about for a long time and screaming at the sky about is that, we have all these wonderful tools but I think the big crux, at least to me, is that we don't have either the knowledge and the skills to use them to the fullest potential to execute on the outcomes, that are desirable to a business. And part of that, I think, is like, and you'll hear about this at Day-to-Day Texas. It's about how do you get a practitioner to focus on outcomes that matter, right? I don't think we have, again, I don't believe that we have, at least to solve classical analytics problems, especially, which we're still struggling with for some reason. Again, back to the old, the 10 years of wasted time, which I do believe we did. Why is it we're still talking about the same stuff? Why is it that most companies are still struggling with BI, let alone doing AI? Why is it that, most people are still using CSVs for stuff, right? I had Dave Langer on my show the other day about Excel. Why is it that Excel is still by far the most widely used data stack in the world? Now it has Python, right? That is a data stack. Everyone uses it, not Python part, but they use Excel all the time. It's like the whole point is, it's like this.
They achieve an outcome.
This is all that matters, and Excel. So I would
I
say
needed
that
a fancy calculator.
The world, if you divided it into like basically a bar chart or a pie chart, however you want to look at it in Excel, or donut chart, if you want to do that. The whole point is like, for all the Excel out there, that's missed opportunity that quote data tooling companies should focus on, because that means that's a workaround to answering a question and getting an outcome that tooling and the practitioners in quote our data space haven't been able to provide to those practitioners. That's one thesis I have.
I think that's really interesting, because for all the amount of time that, going back to output versus outcomes, right, that we spend as data people on building out data infrastructure and things like that, the sales team is still crunching their reports in CSVs and with Excel.
That's the sad reality of it. I mean, I kind of just want to go, go work on a ranch or something at some point. Just like
we're watching the next pendulum swinging over here, and then let's see what's going to happen. And
yeah, it's an interesting one. But it's like, at the same time, there's a lot of innovation. But I think what's going to be harder is if you're a legacy or a mature company that hasn't embraced data or digital stuff, right? I mean, it's easy if you start from scratch. It's like, this is day one stuff. And if you're seeing all the cool blog posts you see from the companies that had to do this because they're digital or data native, like,
and I think like the stuff we're talking about, like open, like table formats, comes from companies who are like very digital first and stuff. And these are the pains that they're heading into. But then you see like other companies who aren't, and they're trying to get updated, and they're like fall into that, and they're like, they think that that's the coolest thing. They want to go try to explain that to your executives who are not very digital first.
Oh no, I was just talking to a friend of mine. She'll be speaking at Day-to-Day Texas, and she's one of those, I would say, accomplished data executives in the world, and she was lamenting that it's one of those things where if you're a mature company, a lot of it's driven by gut feel still, right? And it's like it's all up here.
That's it.
What do I need this stuff for? So
all right, well let's head into our lightning round, because we still got more to go. We got some more more questions.
Long podcast for
well, this is
guys,
officially the longest podcast now that we've done. So
we can keep going if you'd like.
Yeah. No, because I know this is going to take a while here too, and actually I have to go back to do some stuff quickly. So hold on. All right, lightning round questions. Number one. So should everyone be thinking about outcomes, or is it okay for some people to focus on outputs?
I think Joe brought up a good point. Like, there is a lot of work that is just, in some sense, rote, and that's okay. And you don't always have to get fulfillment from your work. I mean, ideally, most of us don't get fulfillment just from our work. And so I think it's fine if, go work at a ranch, and maybe that's perfect. And, that's what you get fulfillment out of. And on the side, you're reading, Kafka, but real Kafka, not Apache Kafka.
The author.
Are we going? Is Joe answering the same questions?
Sorry, I'm writing this right. Read Kafka, but the real Kafka.
Franz Kafka.
Yeah,
Metamorphosis is a good book.
Oh man, that's another t-shirt. Oh, is there so many good t-shirts?
All right. Second question. Instead of yes no, it's actually going to be a quick answer question. So, what is the biggest underappreciated performance hack for data people?
Not having dogs. Aren't gone why.
Biggest underappreciated performance hacks for data people. A quick visualization. I don't want to say tool. So for me, it's if it's tabulated, load it into a pandas data frame, and then column.hist. Like that's it, right? Like I just want to see the data, and I don't want to have to pull it into some fancy BI tool or something. I mean, Excel is not for me. It's hard for me, so I don't want to do it there. So now spin up a Jupyter notebook, do a .hist.
Quick viz in a notebook.
Yeah, I would say listening. It's a good hack.
Never heard of it.
What'd you say?
Listening. I know what you're doing. But no, I mean, it's kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's, and I'm actually going through this in a course I'm making right now. But one of the big things I'm trying to emphasize is real world skills, right? So like going and talking to stakeholders and asking them, okay, so like, what is it you're trying to do, and diving into why are you trying to do it?
Oh my gosh, this is like the best. The first thing is like you're trying to first. What is the problem you're trying to go solve? What is the question you're trying to ask?
Yeah.
Who's asking that question?
Bingo.
And why are they asking that question?
Yep. What does good look like? What is the end? So it was funny. I was actually meeting with a client today, and I, and he's like, so we want to ask me. I was like, I got 2 questions for you. What do you think is going well? What do you think could go better? Right. That's it. And by asking open-ended questions like that and listening to them, open-ended question is meaning you don't get to a yes or no type answer either. It's like, hey, do you like cheese? Yes. No.
No, I mean, this is what you should be very Socratic about it.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, it's like, it's because, let people, so I think that's an underrated skill, but,
All right, so next one. So I'm going to follow with instead of a yes or no here. So we've talked a lot about the open table, the formats and stuff. There's a lot to unpack. What's the best recommendation for people to get up to speed quickly on this?
There's a lot of good amount of blog posts out there that sort of just
anyone in particular, like, or people that you should go, because again, the issue is that there's a lot out there too.
Yeah, this is true. So Ryan Blue of Tabular, he was part of the team that built Iceberg in the first place out of Netflix. I've read a lot of his material around Iceberg. That's helpful. We're trying to. So if you go to the Upsolver blog, the last 3 or 4 have been around Iceberg as well. We're trying to like really put out content that's just meant to educate you on how it works. And I mean, same exists for. I don't want to leave out anyone. Same exists for like Hoodie and stuff. Like just
Vanilla Stowe. I got a question for you. Was CSV the first open table format?
No. Okay, yes. I'll give you that one. 100%.
I'm just like, but okay, anyway.
All right.
Take it away.
Last question. Both of you might actually be interested in this one.
Probably not.
Imagine different data roles, right? Mm-hmm. And this whole spectrum of output versus outcomes. Mm-hmm. Are data engineers the role that is the most out of whack on this spectrum?
So I'm going to contradict myself from something I said earlier in the podcast. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've always had this contradiction within me. I like to do everything. I like each part of the stack, the pipeline, the process, whatever. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, regardless of title or whatever, I really enjoy doing the data engineering and the modeling and all of that. So, I mean, I'm not going to diss on like any one role being out of whack or anything. I think that, there's this, I see a lot of memes around, data engineers holding back a train that's coming and the data scientist is helpless down. I think that's way overblown.
Yes, thank you for calling that out. Is this big ship and I'm on this little thing trying to get like.
It's like data engineer hero worship kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I think where it comes from is like, clearly you can't work with data if you don't know how to get it, right? And that's something that companies and I mean teams get stuck on. Like they want the data function, but it's like, where do I begin, right? And what are the tools? And so like in that sense, yes, you need to be able to bring that in, but that doesn't have to be like this. Yeah.
So what do you mean by out of whack?
Like,
or are they whack? Like, are you saying like?
Let's put it this way. So imagine there's like time in the day and you're spending 40 hours a week working. Like, are data engineers spending more time than other data roles on stuff that's not really making an impact?
I could say that it's probably the case for a lot of data roles. So I wrote an article about this called data LARPs. So LARPs are live action role playing. You might, in the summer, you may go through your local city park and see people dressed up as knights playing swords and that kind of stuff, right? And I feel like I'm actually writing about this right now. This will be an article that's on my Substack, hopefully tomorrow or whatever. Yeah. Should publish it, but it's a notion of Potemkin data team. So there's the Potemkin was somebody in Russia who was dating Catherine the Great, I believe, or Catherine the Dead, I guess, right now. But Potemkin, so to impress her with how grand her land was in Russia, he would actually make fake towns. And she would he would corral it, carry her through in a carriage. And, there's people working, but behind it, it's a complete facade. There's nothing there, right? And so I think, but this is a lot of data teams, I would say in general, irrespective of data. And I'll get into the specifics of your nuance of the question that you just asked. But I feel like a lot of data teams in general are sort of LARPing and/or in a Potemkin situation where they're actually doing a lot of sort of what you described earlier, where we're moving boxes, back and forth and counting them and all this empty stuff, and the outcomes aren't there, right? So I feel like data engineers,
it's less about the role and more about the situation the team is in.
Well, if you kind of zoom out and understand where the entirety of a data team is, it wouldn't really matter what role you're in if the entire objective of the team is to do useless stuff or useful stuff. So I feel like the notion that it would be specific to data engineers, that we talked about abstractions as well in the discussion, right? Juan brought up computer science abstractions, and really you can apply the same principles of solid actually to data teams in the sense where it should be like a single, but it's a single responsibility principle, something like that, right? But these same principles actually apply to teams in the sense where you should be working on things that matter. You should have stakeholders that are directly applicable to outcomes, and often this doesn't happen. And so it's and if you zoom out even further, right? All this happens because of Conway's law. Conway's law basically says you'll design systems and architectures that mimic how you communicate as a company. And so the inescapable law of the universe is, as long as your company is dysfunctional, nothing will save you or the team because it's a transitive property at that point. So yeah, anyway, that's my answer.
I like that. That makes sense.
Kind of. I don't know what I just said. Like Rain Man, I just station. It's like
it all came out.
Yeah.
I'll make one quick little hot take, and then we can move into takeaways, which is that I feel like the answer to the question that I asked is yes, but it's also not fair because data engineers, I feel like the time to get to the next iteration is a lot slower than a data scientist and then even slower still than a lot of data analysts, because I think there's a very fast turnaround time to I need a report on blah. It's like boom,
interesting.
Here's your
But
report.
why would those cadences be separate?
Yeah, exactly. And this is.
I feel like they often are though. I mean, maybe they
often
shouldn't
are.
be.
They
shouldn't.
Well,
Yeah.
they are, but that speaks to the nature of people probably working around bottlenecks of the data engineer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that bottleneck is especially problematic if they're working on the wrong thing, because then the tent pole gets even longer.
Understanding the outcomes.
Don't talk to me like that. No,
All right, Tim. All right. So takeaways. How are we gonna do with this?
All right. How much time do we have? I think we can do this in 30 minutes, right?
Go.
All right. Takeaways.
30 days.
Takeaways. All right. So we started off with the honest no BS question of what do you mean by productivity is not performance? And you really focused on, yes, that is where we started. And we started with there's a big difference between outcomes and outputs, and you can do a lot without doing a lot, which I think is probably the biggest takeaway that I think we can think about as we go through all of this. Is there's a lot of work you could do without actually making an impact. And so, for example, a very complex infrastructure to solve a simple problem, right? we talked about roles and the distinction between companies and data people at companies where maybe data is the core of what that company does versus, maybe more descriptive analytics and things like that in support of the core business being something else. And the way that data works there and what output and what outcomes is going to mean is going to be different. And so think about kind of which organization are you in? You're more the data is the core or, data is supporting. We also talked about, data analysts, they aren't just some awkward person behind Excel,
For yourself.
Data analysts, we love you. But that analytics engineer is actually maybe a better title because it kind of it talks more about the nature of the work that these people are doing to try to make an impact. And so I thought that was interesting. We spent a good chunk of time talking about innovation too, and everyone should be innovating, but it adds a little bit of complexity to the whole outputs and outcomes conversation. Data teams have the opportunity to do the innovation, but you got to know what you're doing. Remember your outcomes. Innovation can be a byproduct of outcome-driven work. And I think that's important, that innovation isn't a distraction if done right. It can actually be in the service of the outcomes that you're trying to drive as an organization. When there's a need that surfaces everywhere, a bunch of people jump on the idea, but there often isn't enough scrutiny around the actual need itself, and if it's actually the important thing to focus on. So we spent a good chunk of time. For those who are listening and if you're just listening to the takeaways episode, you want to listen to an interesting segment. We talked a lot about Snowflake and BI tools and kind of the state of the space and sort of the dynamics there. So that's a very interesting segment you should check out. Juan, what about you? What are your big takeaways?
I think this is a t-shirt one. If you replace DAGs with children, how do you feel? So
models, yeah. Models are never mind.
Yeah, no, because we talk about this, and I think you have hundreds and hundreds of DBT models, all these things you've done. Like, is that
DBT
impressive?
models,
Not, or so forth, right? But again, I bring this up because you tie it back to like the output versus the outcomes, which I think this is the theme throughout it. Outcomes or outputs versus outcomes. It's always about this. And so we also talked a lot about how do we focus on the principles behind the data architecture for better outcomes. And one of them is like, hey, maybe it's like the principles of business value is at the center of everything. And we really dove into a lot of the whole open table formats, right? So talking about from data warehouses to data lakes, and really how it's a specification of how files and information need to be organized. So query planning can be done ahead of time, and you have this what you call this queryable index, right? So it's like that smart layer that preserves the optimization. But it's really interesting how we got into this really technical discussion. But if we zoom out again, it's like, well, outputs versus outcomes around this stuff. Is this a fad or not, right? Maybe no one cares about this stuff, but maybe it is a competitive advantage, right? Or it is a competitive advantage, but to what point? Because at the end of the day, people just want a better query optimizer. So how is that going to go? Are people going to care about that? The outcome here, I asked you, is like, what is the outcome? You said faster, stronger, better, and cheaper. And you know what? That's actually something that as simple as it is, but that's actually so true around that. And finally thing is LLMs. I use it all the time for someone to talk to. All right. How do we do?
Kafka, but the real one. That's
another one that's in there.
Yeah.
All right.
Go team.
Take it away. 3 final questions. What's your advice? Who should we invite next? What resources do you follow?
Be yourself. Do the thing that you enjoy most. Be curious. Scrutinize the ask. Don't get lost in trying to implement what's being asked first. The first thing to do is figure out if the person who's asking knows what they're asking for and why they think they need the thing that they're asking for. Who should you invite? I'm sure you've had every awesome person on here.
Actually, I got one for you.
Yeah.
John Giles.
John Giles. All right.
From Australia.
Australia. All right. Cool. That's a good one.
I was gonna say Hala Nelson. I'm excited.
Hala would be awesome.
Yeah.
You could probably do it in person. She's gonna be here, right?
Yeah, she's gonna be here for Day-to-Day Texas.
She's amazing.
And then what about resources to follow?
So nowadays I just read as I am searching something, like I go down rabbit holes and then read everything on a topic. Like
Mhm.
Yeah, you seem like the kind of person that does that.
so it's less about, I have these 5 subscriptions that I'll go through and read. I don't do that. It's more like where it takes me. So yeah, I don't know. So Joe's standing next to me, so read Joe's book.
And my
I
next
heard you have a
one,
pretty good book.
yeah, it's okay. I don't know.
Some people read it and stuff.
I already know what I want to revise in it, but there's a practical data modeling.substack. I'll give a shameless plug for the new book I'm working on. It's going to be a lot of it's on there already, or not on there already, but it will be on there. Other resources. I always read The Information. It's a paid site, but it's got, I think, probably the best tech journalism there is. So it's worth checking out. And read books. Books are awesome.
Yeah, actually, I do. I don't want to.
Let me ask you, what
Yeah,
books are you into right now?
Mhm.
Right now, I've been slow reading a book on how the basically the history of the Ottoman Empire.
Oh, really? That's cool. Why would you read that?
It had a really cool graphic on it.
Okay.
And when I was
Is this like a newer book or?
no, it's an older book. It's
Okay.
a physical book that I was browsing through a bookstore, and I was very attracted by how it looked. And then I opened it, and Ottoman. I don't know that much about Ottoman history. So.
Mhm.
Wait, it isn't like a bunch of like horses with people on top of the horses going. Is that one?
That is the very, very Spark Notes version, I guess.
Well, because I think I have the same book at my house. I'm not sure.
The graphic. You
Yeah,
mean.
the
I thought you were
cover.
describing the Ottomans.
No, that was not the order. That could have been any empire until recently. Talking like until the 1600s or 1700s. No, that was not what I was referring to.
If you both have this book, then it must be pretty important. It might be something I got to check out too.
I can't remember. I have to go back to my library and look. I got like 1,000 books at home, and then probably another 2,000 on Kindle. But I don't know. I read a lot. That's kind of all I do.
Yeah,
But I'm a dork. So
reading's good, and I think it's nice.
It's terrible for you. Don't read. Don't.
You should
It wastes
read.
all your time. You don't get
Everybody
anything
needs
done.
to read. And it's actually good to read stuff that's not always the same. I find myself sometimes reading too much
Yeah, like
data
what?
books and business books, and sometimes
Yeah.
it's like,
It's-
all right,
Yep.
that's enough. Let's go read about the Ottoman Empire and
But for
something different.
exactly.
That's
but
kind of a
for-
business book, though.
Yes, how to run an efficient empire. How to make the people that you're like ruling over not hate you. That's basically the story of the Ottomans. And yeah,
It's a business book.
It's a
Yeah.
good lesson. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lasted for at least a few hundred years, at least, right? Several hundred years.
Yeah. More
So.
successfully than anything before or after, pretty much.
That's true.
One thing I've been dying to say is
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
like if folks are listening this conversation that are sort of like earlier or newer to data science and like looking for actually like what to read and what skills to pick up on.
Mhm.
I try to say this. Statistics is still an important part of data work, and it's really hard
What
to
do you
find
mean?
good literature.
That was a pun.
If you have to explain your pun.
It'll make sense in a second.
Yeah. So it's not really easy to find good literature on statistics
bad.
yeah,
Mm.
especially in like data science books, if you know what I mean, like
Mhm.
stuff that's sort of come out as the hype over data careers went out. So like I learned my statistics from physics books, like classical
Yeah.
dynamics, thermodynamics.
interesting.
I mean, I'm not advising that, but yeah, find a good.
Oh no,
solid-
stats. I would say
Good
that
solid
that's just a
figure.
good rubric for how to think about the world too. That and probability,
Yeah,
right? I
so
think if you have
two sides of the same coin.
these two sides.
Do you guys know about
There's
the,
a- point.
There's a pun there, and I was like, okay, you set that up. That's great. Go with it.
Do you guys know of a good stats book like that you read and you're like, wow, that was
So the one I cut my
Yeah.
teeth on was by Sheldon Ross's books, but these are pretty
Sheldon
old.
Ross,
but
yeah.
So am I. But he had was intro to probability, then probability models or something like that, and those were good. And then stats. There's like a stats books out there. I can't remember which one I cut my teeth on. I have a lot of them, but but they're mathy.
Yeah.
I don't think you should learn the mathy stuff because this is like you got to realize a lot of this is like you're not using calculators or spreadsheets. You're just doing proofs,
Mhm.
which is different than like prove the central limit theorem. It's like, cool, I'll do that. That's not how to learn stats, at least for most people.
You'd recommend
There
a
is
more
need.
practical approach.
Matt Housley and I were chatting about this like a year ago. There is an open need, I think, for a good statistics for business book.
Yeah, Josh Starmer, I think he's got some of the best YouTube videos. Like Josh was he worked in biology or biostatistician.
Say Josh Stormer? Or?
Starmer, Starmer, not Stormer, with an A. But he's got millions of YouTube subscribers to his videos. He does this thing called Stats Quest. And I think that's pretty awesome too. He started by making videos for his like 9 people in his lab and put them on YouTube. No, he started off doing labs in person, and he's like, I'm going to put this on YouTube, and then for 9 people, and then his videos took off.
Yeah,
right, because he's a really good instructor. Like Josh is like he's just like a gentle human being, like great guy and a great teacher. And then like I would say look at YouTube too. Books I think are actually are kind of terrible to learn from. Khan Academy actually I think has like a really good elementary stats.
That's true. Yeah, Khan Academy has
because I mean I have my kids doing Khan Academy all the time. It's like I would start there. I would avoid reading books for stats because I think to your point, most of it's pretty crap. But and the other part is you want to, in math in general, as you know, you want to keep doing problems and solving them. That's how you get the intuition of how to solve problems. And like in a book, it's hard because you just be like, okay, I go with the exercises. You give me like half the answers of the odd problems in the back. It's dumb. I have to go with the study guide for the rest of it, which is another $1,000 or whatever it costs these days.
Yeah, and if you don't have the structure of actually like going to class and like you do in college, you're not gonna.
No, dude, it sucks. Khan Academy is dope because they gamify it. Like my kids. I have them do Khan Academy every day because I'm like,
badges and completions and stuff like that.
Do we need a disclaimer?
No, I don't work for them. But the kids, there's a dopamine effect with it where it's like they want to keep going. Like my kid, one of my younger kids, he's good. But he's getting better.
I thought you were going to say something more positive there.
Well, I mean, he knows.
You're
But I kind of like, but when he does Khan Academy, he's stoked. He just wants to keep going. I'm like, can we go do something else? I want to keep going.
Yeah.
And that's how you learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Just keep pushing. Like
this resonates with me a lot because actually, when we started talking about stats books, I can't think of really great stats books, and the only thing I can always come back to is I had an amazing high school statistics AP teacher who just was fantastic. He made it fun. He made statistics fun.
Right.
And
Same
like
with me in
that
physics.
probably put me on my
it.
data trajectory, right? And so it's maybe stats is just one of those things where you can read a book and there's books out there that I'm sure that are good, but if you can find a course, a video, something like that, then it's going to be more fun and easier to learn.
Well, math is like poorly taught, dude. I mean, it's like, okay, when you were in elementary school, did you feel like you got a really good math education?
So I went to school in Bangladesh, and yes, I did.
Okay. Yeah. There is,
anecdote. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, when I came here for college, it became very evident to me, like the education that I had received and the structure and the way that it was structured is so different.
So different.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, the U.S. sucks. I mean, I'm just gonna say, like the way we teach math, Common Core, I'm even more confused because I help my kids with their homework. And I have no idea like how this way of teaching it makes any sense, but it is what teachers. I went to one teacher. We went to parent-teacher conferences and reviews, and I felt like I was at a therapy session because the teacher's like, I just can't teach the way I want to teach. And I'm like, yeah, it sucks. I know.
Yeah, that's tough right now.
It is. So you got to take advantage. There's a lot of good resources online. Khan's awesome.
Yeah.
Like Sal Khan, I think deserves a Nobel Prize. For everything he's done.
You still don't work for him, right?
I don't work for him. No, I literally don't. No, I'm just saying, like.
No, they have really good resources. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, how did we do, guys? Was this good?
I don't know. What was the outputs and what are the outcomes?
I don't know. I think we just produced a lot of really good tidbits. So.
Sure did.
Shantana, Joe.
Thank you.
This was fun.
You.
Yeah, thanks.
Appreciate you all joining
here too.
Yeah.
I don't know where he went, but
I think he had to duck out for a second here. So
yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers,
Joe. Glad to have you here.
My empty beer can. Yeah.
Cheers, everyone. Appreciate you joining us today. Hey, next week, Jessica Talisman is going to join us from Without Information
She's
Architecture. And thank you to Data.World that lets us do this. We get to drink and hang out and talk data, and then go to Data Texas. So
Yeah, see you at Data Texas. It's gonna be awesome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cheers, y'all.
Thank you.
Bye.